All right, there we are. We are live. It is live before lock here, and we're on the road, much like Wheel of Fortune goes to other cities and Jeopardy tries
Just
different
like that.
venues. We are south of the border with Fast Eddie. Tell the people where you're at.
God, I don't even remember. It's been a wild couple of days. Somewhere in Mexico. No, I'm in Riviera Maya, not far from Osimo himself. Actually, Alex is about 12 minutes up the road. He and
Oh,
I
are
are
you
gonna.
kidding? I had no idea.
Yeah, he's right up the. He is resisting my overtures. I don't know if he's watching this to do a show together. And I think it's because I told him how I was going to start the show. I thought it would be really funny if we just build it as a normal me show or whatever. And then the show starts and it's me sitting next to Alex in paradise or something. And I thought that would be funny. And then I thought it would be funny if I said, Alex and I have been taking this yearly getaway together for about 10 years now, and I can't live a lie anymore. And well, I think at that point, I think his interest waned a little bit, but I'm not deterred. I'm still going to try to
Well, there's time. You guys are both
keep.
down there for a little while, so who knows? Dreams may come
Yeah,
true.
I'm gonna try to come back, and I missed my Christmas date with Mr. Engelman. Hopefully, he's still good for New Year's. So that's my next targeted date. And I wanted to do yesterday, and then realized that with my meager resources on the road, it was going to be a little crazy. And I should say that from the outset here, my first fealty, my second fealty, definitely to Osmo to the team, but my first loyalty must be to you and your investment, your bankroll, your pocket. So I have not all the resources I normally do. I put many hours in today, but am unable to see all the things I normally see. I'm watching less tape. I'm just less immersed in things because I'm spending half the day doing music and volleyball and all these other things, whereas normally I'm, chained almost literally to my desk. So if I say something today that sounds particularly scary, specious, or otherwise unwise, it might be. So just be like whatever degree of skepticism you have for me in general, just go ahead and kick that up a couple notches because I'm dealing with less. I'm not that smart. I'm just always extremely well prepared, and I'm slightly less well prepared today. So just got to keep that in mind.
Well, you almost got Wally pipped yesterday. We had to make a call to the bullpen. One Jay Walker came back.
Really? Did he?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Jay Walker, Prince of a Man, by the way, Prince of a Man. That's great to hear.
Yeah,
I don't.
it was
He's
a
older.
good show. It was a good show.
Oh, was it you and him?
Yes.
So really, you went for the even older demographic. Like you and I weren't cutting it, so really,
Yeah, it was kind of funny. They had a couple people bail earlier, like, "Oh, I'm not gonna watch these guys." And it's like, "Hi, Jay Walker, two-time NFL Live finalist, had his own DFS website. Let's see. Oh yes, was an Atlanta Hawks beat writer for 8 years, and still does
yeah,
call-in radio for them. Yeah,
yeah.
let's not listen
I,
to him."
yeah. I occasionally get guy who jumps on me and is like, "What? You're not allowed to play anymore? I'm not listening to you if you don't have any skin in the game." I'm like, "You really think that's how it works?" Like I played fantasy sports. I've played something with fantasy sports every day for 25 years and played DFS every day for 7 years, but the day that I wasn't allowed to play anymore, because I work in fantasy sports in my day job, somehow all the knowledge I had accrued just disappeared. So that's always
Ah, indeed,
a curious
indeed.
one.
All right. Well, we're letting a few people gather in here because we are going a little bit earlier than normal. It is a 6 o'clock lock this evening. FanDuel is going with the 5 games. DraftKings going at 8 o'clock tonight, and they've got the 4 games. Now, the reason we had to do the show early is we also have the NFL live before lock for the final regular season game, which we'll be broadcasting through the NBA lock. So we couldn't. I couldn't be at 2 places at once, and the other people. We have so many people traveling today. They're just like, "All right, well, we'll go early then," because that was our option. So that's where we are. We of course have Slack chat. You've got us on Twitter. You've got us everywhere else. So as updates occur or things change, we'll know. Now the first big one we have is going to be a difficult one for FanDuel. So we'll talk about that in a second. But with FanDuel, they have their early lock, and James Harden is actually a game time decision tonight. Now, I would suspect, hope, believe he's going to play. We already know Clint Capella's out, and I almost said Russell Wilson. That'll be the next show. Russell Westbrook is also out for tonight. So we'll talk about some of the understudies that are going to get their moments tonight. A couple other notable guys in that first game here. OKC will be without Dennis Schroeder, and Danilo Gallinari is still out. We have Eric Gordon available to play, which is interesting. We have Paul Millsap, who's also going to be a game time decision with a bruised quad. De'Aaron Fox, also a game time decision. He's been dealing with back spasms. He's missed a couple games, but they've said we'll see how he is when he warms up. If it's good, he's good. We also know that Jay Crowder is out with an ankle injury. Anthony Davis is questionable. Normally we get the probable, but we've had questionable the last couple times with the shoulder. And LeBron James is playing through a sore groin, but he is listed as probable. He did play last night. Now they're on a back-to-back. They were against Portland last night.
Everybody is on a back-to-back except for 2 teams.
Okay, and nobody plays tomorrow. Nobody these teams.
Nobody who plays tonight plays tomorrow. Yes, there are 10 teams playing on this slate, or 8 if you're looking at DraftKings. The only ones who didn't play yesterday are Charlotte and someone. I don't think Usually I have the stuff memorized, but again, on the road I'm a little dicey. It's Charlotte and someone.
I don't
Charlotte
think Memphis
is on. Charlotte. Oh no, it's Charlotte and the Thunder. Yeah, it's Charlotte and the Thunder.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm sure. It's Charlotte and the Thunder did not play yesterday. The other 8 teams all played. So everyone is on the back end of a back-to-back, except for the Thunder and the Hornets. I'm 99% sure. Someone confirm that to me, and I'll confirm it back out. But I'm pretty sure everyone is on back end of a back-to-back, except for those 2 teams. I'm checking them one at a time, but this seems like a copious waste of time.
And that's good. So I get Shalom in chat having a couple questions here. One, if you use the promo code live before lock, that all of our promo codes switch to 50% off a weekly package. That's it, not the monthly package anymore. That's weekly package. So all of them will work on that. And then yes, Eddie's actually on his phone. So this is a slightly different setup, and I've framed it as best as we can. So you'll just have to deal with it. Sorry, I did not realize being able to see Eddie adds to the analysis. But
can they not see? Am I?
No, they can see you just fine. It's just that I have about a quarter or half an inch on each side where you would normally be extended fully to the border when you're not. It's just the background. So, well, I can only go so far on with the way it's set up. But you're just fine. You're perfectly fine there. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this first game here since it's only FanDuel. We've got OKC at Toronto. Toronto home favorites by 5. Again, Toronto been kind of banged up with their various injuries, but their guys are just absolutely playing heavy minutes. We know that will be Fred VanVleet, of course. We've got our buddy Kyle Lowry in there, and then for the bigs, that's where the question marks really start to come in. So they've won, 6 of their last 8 and 7 of their last 9. So they came at it's like everybody got hurt, and Kyle Lowry came back, and they lost a few, but now they're back in the mix here, winning again, and they seem to have righted the ship. But this is an interesting matchup for them. On both sides here. So let's start off here with the Toronto side. How are you feeling about OG Anunoby, Ibaka, the VanVleet, Lowry, etc. going against the Thunder?
I am cautiously optimistic for all of these guys. It's a really interesting slate in that we are dealing with potentially massive bits of usage available on all these teams we're looking at. Schroeder being out, and obviously when we look at Toronto dealing with there being no Pascal Siakam, no Marc Gasol, no Norman Powell still. Not the greatest matchup relative to the others in terms of pace, but again, there are no DraftKings prices, so just looking at the FanDuel prices, $8,000 for Kyle Lowry is still a little bit too cheap. Sans these guys. Now, it's not the best matchup for him, but he's going to project for still a bit over 40 fantasy points for me. And at $8,000, that still obviously leaves some upside. All he has to do is get towards, say, 50 to crush it. He's not going to make it into one lineup for me. but I don't mind having. He's probably first guy in for me. Although just on FanDuel, I still think you can make a pretty strong case for Rondé Hollis Jefferson. The minutes have obviously been all the hell over the place. There is dovetailing with OG Anunoby, and obviously you're upset if you played RHJ in the last game, because even with OG Anunoby, I think he fouled out of the game in 15 minutes. I think he got his 6 fouls. You still only got whatever it was, 19 minutes out of RHJ, and they just leaned on Pat McCaw the whole day. And again, this is a team that I've said this every time it's been applicable this year. They don't personally like Rondé Hollis Jefferson. Whatever it is, dude does not get as many minutes as he should, and he just ends up playing behind guys who are strictly worse than him, which includes Pat McCaw. Having Pat McCaw play 40 minutes and Rondé play 18 is inequitable and inefficient distribution of resources. That being said, we have seen upside games from him where he gets over some 30 minutes, and I think that's pretty exciting for me. But again, with all the Houston value, even if James Harden plays, pretty hard to get there. So I suppose my takes on this team would be, you obviously can Fred VanVleet. I would rather Kyle Lowry and save the $500. I have him projected a little bit higher anyway. I suspect the ownership is higher commensurately as it should be. After that, I'm not really interested in spending $5K on Chris Boucher. He's going to end up just playing. I think of the 5 games since the swath of injuries came down, there were 2 times that he got about 3 minutes besides Serge Ibaka, but the most likely scenario most days is going to be Serge Ibaka plays 30 minutes and you get 18 minutes or so of Chris Boucher. That's plenty interesting when he's priced in the 3s, but over 5K, you need a couple too many things to break your way. And again, all these plays you have to take in the context of having some exceptional value on some of these other teams, most notably, again, Houston. So for me, probably Lowry, RHJ, third guy in, probably Anunoby. There should be some real defensive lapses coming in on the wing for this team, and they will run Anunoby out there the full minutes if you could. And after that, I would get to Pat McCaw. Like, not a big fan of Pat McCaw, but he's $4,000 and is going to play somewhere between 25 and 40 minutes. So I think you have to have some exposure, but he would be at the list of the guys. I would have him after Anunoby. I would have to sit there and think about Pat McCaw or Terrence Davis for a while. Terrence Davis is still the minimum. I could see that happening. I do think at some point they will move away from giving Pat McCaw 40 minutes. He's simply a worse player than both Davis and Rondé Hollis Jefferson, really on both ends of the court. So I think there's a naked pictures thing going on here or something, because he does not deserve the run he's getting. He's got that Trevor Ariza deal, where it's just like, you're the 12th best player on the team. Why don't you play 30-odd minutes?
Yeah. Let's not go there with Trevor. Okay, you've got Gallinari out. We've seen this movie before a few times, but now we have Dennis Schroeder out. So that means that there should be plenty of extra shots funneling their way to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, most definitely, to a lesser extent, Chris Paul, less people to battle with for the bunnies and the rebounds for Adams. So I think he's okay. We know that Adams and Nerlens Noel still have not shared the court together. So that's always a fun one. If you're going to play them, don't play them both. I looked at this. I didn't look at their last game, but I had looked at it going into last game, and it was 0.
The entire year.
Oops, I'm going to sneeze here in a second. But yes, for the entire year, they have not yet played next to each other.
I really thought I saw them do that.
I actually ran the query on 2 different sites to make sure. I didn't want to.
I can't specifically recall it, but for some reason I had the recollection. But again, there's a lot of big playing next to big. I'm probably getting it confused with Gasol and Ibaka was the thing, and Bagley and Rashawn Holmes was the thing. So there's a lot of, are these guys going to play astride each other? So I'll assume I'm remembering that incorrectly.
All right. But what are you liking amongst
Plumlee and Jokic?
The other guys?
Yeah, I prefer Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for $300 less than Chris Paul. I imagine Chris Paul gets the slightly more difficult defensive matchup, and then he'll deal with Lowry, which is harder for him. Freddles and some of these other guys are excellent defenders, but they're against certain guys. So if you are Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and have that particular skill set, you would rather get the matchup with the guys down at the 2 and the 3. So I just think it works slightly better for him. There's a whole bunch of bad DFS players who are going to pick up some minutes here, from Terrence Ferguson, who will get back up to his 30 whatever minutes and do absolutely nothing, to now Darius Bazley will be in the rotation. Deontay Burton's going to I have him in the mid-20s in minutes. If I have to play one of these minimum price guys, which again, I would almost rather take like 7th and 8th guys on Houston, but probably Abdul Nader would be my favorite of them. He's still sitting, I think, the flat minimum again. This is just FanDuel, but I think he's still just 3,500. So I like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander a little more than Chris Paul. I really like the two of them and Steven Adams. There is just a lot of usage to go around here on this team. And this Toronto team is playing a little faster than we're used to and isn't quite as defensively stalwart down the middle as they were in the past. So I slightly would rank them, Gilgeous-Alexander, Paul, Steven Adams, as to my preference in getting to them. But yeah, there's a lot of usage to go around for these guys. This is the first game of the year that Dennis Schroeder has missed. I'm almost certain. I haven't looked that up, but pretty certain. And his usage is really considerable, and all these guys who are filling in for him are anything but. So there's a significant number of 20 shots are going to be replaced by a guy who takes 4 shots, and those other 16 have to get spread around. So none of these guys are that expensive where you're low 7s on the 2 guards, and I think it's 6-4 for Steven Adams. I like the upside each of these guys contain, and I would try to want to make sure that I had at least one in my lineups.
All right.
They profile pretty similarly at this point to the guys across the ball. So you have Shea and Chris Paul at low 7s, and then you have Lowry and Fred at low 8s, and they end up really all projecting pretty similar to me. So big fan of the guys on the Thunder.
Anything else from this game, or shall we cruise on to the 8 o'clock crowd?
Yeah, they'll bring us back in questions if I miss something.
Excellent. All right, on to the 8 o'clock games here. So we're going to start off with Houston. We've got, I guess all of the games are at 8 o'clock except that third one, or pardon me, that fourth one. So Houston favored by 2 at this point. This opened at 4.5. This game is in New Orleans. We already know that Westbrook and Capella are out, so they are actually big components of this team. Some people have been saying that they think that favorite or spread is so low that with Houston only being favored by 2 on the road, that they don't think Harden's going to play. I do want to caution that, 1, we don't know for sure. 2, this opened at 4.5. It's only down to 2. 3, they lost in Golden State already with everybody. And this one is one where I still think he's probably going to play. I mean, he's going to be a game time decision, and we'll know for everything but FanDuel, unfortunately. How would you approach him on FanDuel, since that is what locks first?
Well, it's really a question of, you have to decide for yourself what you think the odds are he plays and how valuable he is relative to the other studs on the slate, and what level of risk you're willing to take. So let's assume that we agree that he is the best play on this slate, that he is going to score more fantasy points than, say, Luka Doncic and LeBron James. And we'll throw some completely random numbers at this and say James Harden is going to score 70, you think, and Luka's going to get 65, and LeBron's going to get 58. I don't know. If you think that's what's going to happen, and then you factor in the chance of a supernumerary upside, like, it is possible that Luka gives you an obscene number tonight, but pretty unlikely against a team with the pace and the reasonable defense of the Lakers. I like Luka for a little bit under 60 tonight. Not surprised if he gets 65. And again, we have a lot of history for both of these games. This is the third game between the Rockets and the Pels this year. This is the third game between the Lakers and the Mavericks this year. And I've watched each of the predecessors a couple times each. So you have to determine for yourself how much better Harden is, how low you think he's going to be owned on FanDuel, presuming we don't get news, and whether or not you like to take that risk. I suspect I would like to take the risk. And I suspect that he will end up being owned on FanDuel somewhere in the range of 20 to 25%. As a pure vagary, I do think I would want to have more of him than that. There is a very real chance against the Hornets tonight with no Westbrook, with no Capella, that he runs out and throws up 100 fantasy points. And I would be inclined to take that risk because my gut read on the situation is that I have him somewhere around 65-35 to play. That's based on comments from various people. When the news came out, the fact that he was initially listed and the changes that were made across the various injury reports on NBA.com. And again, I'm keeping track. I really wish I had my 2 computers and 4 monitors, not laptop and phone. But my best guess is that he goes out there and gives it a go. But it's not unreasonable to factor in the fact that, like, again, every team but the Thunder and Hornets, this is a back-to-back, and he played, I think it was 39 minutes last night I saw. So, there are a number of ways it goes squirrely. But taking my guesses, which, again, I'm a little bit departed from the world right now, but I imagine he still gets, if we heard nothing, 20-25% owned on FanDuel. Yeah, I'd want to get on top of that number because I simply think there's a very real chance. I would have him projected, assuming no news came out, for somewhere in the area of 66 fantasy points tonight. And that's really hard for me to get away from. We've seen these games before. Again, Drew squatted on him pretty good one time, and you got an excellent Westbrook game. Unsurprisingly, there was one game where he was, I think it was 8 for 29 from the field and 2 for 19 from 3. He had, excepting the Miami strip club debacle, his worst game of the year was one of the times against the Pelicans. I really don't care. I could talk about those 2 games for a while, but they aren't really reasonable approximations of no Westbrook, no Capella. You just have Harden, no Westbrook, no Capella, and there really aren't any other priorities. My number of 66 is counting reduced time and counting potentially reduced efficiency. And, if he played the full game under his full auspices and talents, I imagine that number would sit somewhere around 73 or 74. It's a truly insane number. So, long story short, yeah, I gotta be pretty interested in James Edward Harden tonight. So on FanDuel, yeah, I would load in some Harden, but you have to do it with the understanding that he could be limited in some way. Seems unlikely. He could not play. So you are taking a substantial risk, and I really like LeBron and Luka tonight, so you can certainly build a lineup without going there. I enjoy taking the risk, and I look at the situation like, oh, sweet, they made him a game time decision. I randomly get a guy who should be 83% owned on FanDuel, quite possibly at 25%. That makes my socks roll up and down all by itself.
All right. There we go. So that was important to talk about this game because this is for the FanDuel people, and it's a dual show. So for those of you feeling a little sad that say we have not talked about nothing for 13 minutes, we have plenty of time. This isn't going to impact what you're doing here because we're going to get through the rest before it actually locks here on FanDuel. But these are highly important things, and discussing how to handle James Harden when you have no way out is very important, because I can guarantee you that's what all the questions would be at the end of the show if we didn't spend some time discussing it. Now, looking at the rest of the players here, we have some interesting spots here. So last night, craptastic. Let's see. You are correct. We did have Harden play 39 minutes. Westbrook played 38. Daniel House Jr. went 41. PJ Tucker went 37. They ran an 8-man rotation. Hartman Stein 24, Rivers 25, Mclaughlin 25. Looks like those guys are going to get some heavy run again tonight because now we're going to be without Westbrook. So Clark, I would like to think would get in at some point here. Thabo Sefolosha, he's not as young as he once was, and he is dealing with an illness as well. He did not play last night. I don't know that he would get much playing time, but perhaps Clemens would get in here. Do you think those guys get in? And how much do you like somebody like Isaiah Hartman Stein, Austin Rivers, Ben McLemore? Because that's where some of our value plays are coming from.
You're skipping the main man. You're skipping Eric Gordon.
Oh, you are correct. And
Yeah,
Eric
don't
Gordon
forget.
making his return after missing how many games? Do we know what kind? Let me see what I can find. If he's been practicing, how healthy is he?
Yeah, he's been practicing. He's been through a few full practices. They've limited him to 25 minutes, I believe I saw. Um, yeah, it's a sticky situation. So we can compare it immediately to last night's game, where you had basically what you expected. You had 24 or 25 minutes out of Hartman Stein and Mclaughlin. Austin Rivers played 22. Now you're going to lose 38 minutes or whatever it was of Westbrook and pick up 25 minutes of Eric Gordon. So we have like 13 minutes floating around.
Okay.
So that should be clear. I am not a fan of picking up Cephalosha, Clark, or Clemens in a vacuum because they tend to just give more minutes, and we have no reason to think they won't do what they've done every other time, which is give those minutes to Ben McLemore, who we've seen play 30 whatever minutes in the game again. So they're going to drop Westbrook's 38 minutes, and they're going to give 25 to Eric Gordon and 13 to Ben McLemore, driving him into the mid-30s, give or take. That may not be the case, but it's likely enough that it makes it unlikely that I get 20-odd minutes out of Thabo Cephalosha or Gary Clark or Chris Clemens. So for that reason, those guys seem a little too cute to me. So, yeah, we come around to Eric Gordon, who I, like everyone else in the world, had a dreadful time with this year and last year, and for many years, frankly, where he really laid eggs in some pretty brilliant spots. He was healthy and active as, I believe, sixth man in both of the games against the Pelicans earlier this year. Played 30 and 35 minutes off the bench and was thoroughly uninspiring in those games. Again, Harden and Westbrook available in both those games. But I suspect I would take the risk and want to be over the field on what I suspect is a fairly low-owned Eric Gordon. I don't know if you can pull up ownership because I'm curious what we have projected as the ownership on some of these guys. But
Yeah, I'm looking now because I'm curious. I've looked at two sites and now I'm trying to look at ours. I want to see where they're putting the minutes at. And both the other sites I've looked at had them at 25 for minutes. We have him at 16% ownership on DraftKings, where he is 3,500.
Yeah,
we have him at
fair.
11% on FanDuel, and then over on Yahoo, he is $14. So he's just 1% there. There are other better plays than that. But
right. So here's sort of how it comes down. In the event James Harden is out, you want massive exposure to this team. If James Harden is out, you literally play. I would start almost every lineup with Mclemore and Gordon, and be very well interested in getting to, probably in order after that, Tucker, House, Rivers, maybe Tucker, Rivers, House. It would be interesting after that. And again, the prices I don't quite have memorized today and are a little bit different site by site. But you want the guys who are going to try to put the biscuit in the basket, and you will just get stupid amounts of shots out of those two guys. So I would make my first priorities. But you want simply massive exposure to a team where everyone is incredibly cheap, and you're going to have a 7 or 8 man rotation adding Clark, Clemens, or a Cephalosha. In the event Harden is out, I mean, we sort of have to do this side by side, but I will start by saying, in the event you get news that Harden is out, I would want to be massively exposed to the Rockets against the Pelicans. I would want 4 guys. Now, there's an interesting question of, again, I don't have the ability or the resources. I can't even actually get on the websites from here to tinker around with lineups. So I've tried to memorize as much of the pricing as I can, where there's a point at which you have too much money to spend and you're forcing yourself to play guys who are not that ideal. You're like, I guess I have to play LeBron and Anthony Davis and Luka because I'm running these 4 Rockets who cost $3,700 a piece. So you obviously don't want to squeeze yourself too hard like that, but that game would still project to be a fairly close one. All those guys would look absolutely brilliant and simply would play tons of minutes. So in the event Harden is out, I don't have my tools for projecting a rotation, but I think you would get something like 42 minutes from Daniel House, 38 minutes from Ben McLemore, 35 minutes from Austin Rivers, 39 minutes from PJ Tucker. You'd end up with Tyson Chandler and Isaiah Hartenstein, assuming Chandler is in again, which I expect, spending about 38 minutes at center, and PJ Tucker grabbing the last 10 of those. And you'd end up with needing, you would probably get both Clark and Clemens into the rotation. I would prefer Clemens for a number of reasons.
All right, so we've got a $2 super chat here asking, let's just assume Harden in. How many minutes do you think Hartenstein gets? Osmo has him at 24.
He has him at 24?
Yep.
That's about what I would expect, yeah. He's generally, they'll news aside, they want to start Chandler. They want him to come in with that second unit. He would play in the event of a blowout. So I could see projecting him for a minute or two more, but I'm pretty sure he got about 24.
Yeah, he got 24 and a half
yesterday.
last night. Yeah, with 9 points, 13 boards, a steal, and an assist. So
yeah, he's a guy we've watched for quite a while. Very decent fantasy player. I don't mind Hartenstein whatsoever. Now at that point, he can be a little handsy. I think he had 4 or 5 fouls yesterday in his limited time, and there is no real need for this team to have a true center. Like, you can put PJ Tucker on Derek Favors or Jackson Hayes or what have you, and it'll work out just fine. So, he comes in after these other guys for me. But again, in the event James Harden is out, all these guys become incredibly interesting value plays for me. Even with James Harden in, I like Hartenstein quite a bit, not knowing his price tag offhand, I have to admit. But assuming he's sitting somewhere in the 4K range, I find him a pretty compelling tournament play.
All right, on to the New Orleans side here. Of course, Brandon Ingram and Drew Holiday are standing out. Derek Favors, kind of a secondary play. We've seen his price continue to tick up a little bit here, but this is a reasonably decent matchup for him. And then Lonzo Ball. The heck are we going to get from Lonzo Ball? That seems to be the enigma wrapped in a mystery, shrouded in a riddle. My apologies to Winston. I got that one out of order there. But Ball into the starting lineup. He started the last 3, 4 of the last 6. He has played 30 and 36 in the last 2. Against Portland, he played only 18 in that starting role. He did have 3 fouls. I didn't go back.
Quick fouls. Yeah.
Yeah, didn't go back and look to see where he got those. But he has not.
He got 2 of them in the first quarter, leading to him being yanked in like 2 minutes. So in the first half, he lost like 10 minutes. Yeah, he got Ubered.
So the question is, can he top 30 fantasy points? Because he has once since December 5th, when he dropped a 54 burger on Phoenix. So
yeah, I like him quite a bit. They want to play him 30 odd minutes, and he's not on my Blake Griffin list. He's on the list of guys who I think actually looks just fine to me structurally. So I think he will turn around and start averaging. He's not averaging bad this year. He's, I think, a bit under a fantasy point a minute, but I expect that to kick up to a bit over a fantasy point a minute. And this is a team that's going to be pretty woeful defensively today when you have to. I mean, Austin does the best he can, but House is having some real man-on-ball defensive issues and adding the time to Mclaughlin. Like, they're going to get slapped around a little bit, so I have Lonzo Ball projected for 31 minutes and 34 and a half fantasy points and at $5,000, whatever. I'm a pretty big fan of Lonzo. So, I like Lonzo quite a bit. He's probably my favorite play on this team simply because the price on, Favors, as you mentioned, has come up. He's looked great. He's, out there playing for his mama, if you will. Like, he's really looked motivated every game since he returned from his bereavement. But the limited time sort of caps the ceiling a little bit, and he's in the mid 6s. Ingram I like quite a bit, but again, he's like 9, I think, on FanDuel, a little over 8 on DraftKings. So, Lonzo, I think there's a real chance. I expect to continue to produce a little better over time. So, no issue with you playing Drew Holiday or Brandon Ingram or Derek Favors. I'm pretty interested in all those guys. You can even fire Yeah, like a punt at Jackson Hayes at the DK prices. I think 3,300. That kind of works. You can try some Echuan Moore and see if his role in there is still good. I'd have a non-zero amount of shares of him. And again, sorry, I could not do the rankings. If I do a show on Wednesday, I will try to get those in ahead of time, which requires some FTPing and other work. But yeah, Lonzo my favorite play on this team. I don't know what we have him owned at. I'm gonna guess 20-ish. But
Some projected stats page, but let's over to here.
what do we have him projected for stats? I'm kind of curious.
We've got Lonzo for 19 on DraftKings, 19%, 20% on FanDuel. If we are looking at some projected stats, we have him for 29 minutes, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 5.5. That's, am I reading the right column? Sorry, that's 2 3-pointers, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists.
So 2 minutes less and probably 3 fantasy points less than I have. Not unreasonable.
All right. Anything else in this game?
Well, let's see. I want to re-stress again that the situation with Harden, that you really want to have an overflow onto the Rockets' plan in the event Harden is out. In the event Harden is in for DraftKings consideration, yeah, I would want to have a lock. The closer to lock he is confirmed in, the more you should be trying to overwhelm the field. If he gets announced in at 6:40 and there's 80 minutes before lock, he'll end up being 65% on it. So there's not a huge advantage. If they don't announce him in until 4 minutes before lock, he'll end up being 30% owned, and I would want to have 100. I just smother it at that point. But yeah, I guess ready to move on for the moment.
All right. One question. So McCaw or Mclemore? This is for Don't Indeed My Status, a FanDuel question. Without knowing the status of Harden, so he just says we don't know. Would you go Mclemore or McCaw?
In a tournament, I would play Mclemore, not terribly close. Like, we just kind of got the ceiling McCaw game, finally. Out of 5 games, he got oodles of time, and he had his best game last game and got 30, I think. Maybe got a little better than 30. He finally had a decent game yesterday. I would rather RHJ, but you're talking FanDuel, so that's likely not translatable. So yeah, I would play Ben McLemore. It's obviously we don't know enough, and that's a bit more of a reach, but even in 25 minutes without Westbrook there, first of all, there could certainly be more time. They could just run small a little bit more, and you could get 30 minutes out of him. Wouldn't surprise me whatsoever with Harden in there. But just having Westbrook out, it's McLemore for me by a pretty decent amount. Much better matchup. So, yeah, I would play Ben there.
All right. Next game here, I'm kind of, on the Sacramento Kings, or after last night, what I would like to call them, the Sacramento Kings. Come on, that was a good matchup. Home.
Trying to remember last.
They lost 112-110 at home, but it was not a great game it was an adequate game at best by Hield, but not considering those other 2 heavy usage guys were out, and then it was a poor game by
Also, third time of the year for this matchup. Yep. We've had 2 Denver-Sacramento games previously as well. I know, they were terrible. I remember.
So I like Jokic. That's really about it from this entire game. We only have 4 because I'm only playing on DraftKings. That's severely hampering the player pool to do something silly like that. So there's got to be some other opportunities here. Let's start off with the Denver side here. Everybody gets relatively even minutes. We've got Sacramento double-digit underdogs on the road on the back-to-back. So we might see things tip a little closer to some of the Denver bench guys, but even then, it's basketball. Anything can happen. Miami beat New England today. Come on, anything can happen in sports. But what do you like here from Denver outside of Jokic, and how much do you like Jokic, assuming a reasonable outcome of Denver just controlling this game in the Pepsi Center at altitude?
Yeah, I still like Jokic as obviously it's still not betting 1,000, but it has really flick the switch, which he does every year sometime around Christmas. Like, he always starts slow and goes through an incredible doldrum in November, December. This is like the third year in a row. And then by the middle of January or February, we're like, this guy is amazing. And it's pretty interesting that it happens year after year after year. But he's, again, without anything in front of me right now, he's had, I don't know, 6 good games out of his last 8 by Jokic standards, where he's getting at or near 50, I would say, top of my heading that. And it's not a matchup that I expect to be terribly imposing. Again, hasn't looked great. Really, nobody's looked great. The couple times earlier this year, these teams have gotten together. Again, I'll make sure that I have the full injury news apprised in my head. Yep. We have De'Aaron Fox questionable.
De'Aaron Fox questionable with back spasms. Paul Millsap questionable with a bruised quad.
Bagley out.
Bagley is out for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, Gary Harris should play. Trevor Ariza
should play. Trevor Ariza is sick and out or questionable?
Sick and questionable.
Right. Okay. Just want to make sure I had everything.
Yep.
So how many minutes did Bogdan play last night?
I can get that in one moment. I thought I could get that in there. There we go. Okay. Sorry. I had the wrong box score up. He played 31.7, and then 2 days ago played 43.3.
Right. Okay. So, so both of these games earlier this year were muddy. The memory serving, one of them went to overtime, and they still each scored like 195 or 200 points in both games, counting the one that went to overtime. The pace isn't particularly brilliant. Obviously, that will tick up a little bit if you have Fox back in there as opposed to otherwise. My favorite guy in Sacramento would probably, at their current prices, end up being Buddy Hield. It is a bad matchup, but it is simply a spot in which he is now reduced too cheap. Whereas he was, floating up into the mid 7s. I think I saw him in the mid 5s somewhere today, where he's 5.7 or something like that. That's a little too cheap for a spot in which you can end up taking 25 shots. He hasn't been great. And the first time around, with the series of Fox injuries, we saw simply not the good games we expected to see. Either the shooting efficiency wasn't there, or the volume wasn't there, or just Bogdan took over, or Ariza screwing up the rotation with his 30 random minutes, or there was just enough ways that it didn't quite work out. I don't think that's terribly endemic of how it would work in the future. I think you would catch ridiculous ceiling games once in a while. You're not dead if Fox is in, obviously, but just at that price, even dealing with Gary Harris, who's done well against him in the past, I would still look at that as just too cheap, looking for guys who have a real upside at their price. Past that, we're still going to have some interest in Bielitsa. I think he's 4,500 on either FanDuel or DraftKings I saw. That's too cheap when you have Bagley out there. I am projected for over 30 minutes, and there's obviously not a ton of value on the slate aside from Houston. So Bielitsa, I think FanDuel's 4,500. Can you check that for me?
Yeah, it's he's 57 on DK.
Right, 57. That's fine. Don't get me wrong. It's absolutely
and 45 on FanDuel.
Yeah, 4,500 on FanDuel is a little too cheap for Bielitsa. Bagley is confirmed out, so he's one of the best point per dollar value plays there. I imagine he'll be fairly popular for that reason, because again, I would imagine most projection systems will spit him out as fairly interesting. But he deserves a special shout out there. Outside of that, it's ugly. If you went back through these two games these two teams have played and said, here are the useful fantasy lines, you're looking at like 1 per game collectively from both teams. Like it is slow. And aside from, Hield, who is priced cheap enough that if he gets 28, he hasn't killed you, and 37 legitimately might be good enough to win you something on a 4-game slate. That's just sort of a price play, but obviously, for Denver, if you got news that Millsap was in, I would have all of those other guys pretty close. Just over 6K for Barton. is, down to a price where he has that sort of upside that he can get on top of it. It's not a particularly great matchup for him for pace reasons and the way they tend to operate the offense in this matchup. You tend to get more Jokic and then Murray. They're not priced that brilliantly. If you're playing Murray, you want Fox in, that would make him a little more appealing for me. But, past Jokic, just because of his pricing on his own tier, the other 4, 5, 6 guys for this team, again, when you're talking about sort of the 3 power forwards, you can feel a little happier about Mason Plumlee if they start him again. I don't think they will start him again here. They didn't really need him in the matchup yesterday where they started him next to Jokic. That was a little bit strange. But if Millsap starts at his price, yeah, I'd want some tournament exposure there, and he's going to be, depending on when they announce that he's starting, 1, 2, 4% owned. So yeah, I'd want to make sure I had more than that of Paul Millsap. In the event Plumlee starts again, I'd have some interest in it there, and that would, backs its own play as having some blowout protection there. And Jeremy Grant sitting around 4K is always going to be interesting for me. But past Jokic, that entire Harris, Plumlee, Grant, Barton, Murray, all those guys are guys I would want to have somewhere between 5 and 10% ownership of, but not a super amount of any of them. I think 1 or 0 of them will be good. It's not a game I'm terribly interested in stacking.
All right. Anything else you want to mention from the Sacramento side, or shall we move on? And then I've got a question here for you.
Well, give me a question and I'll.
All right. House and Hartman Stein or Gordon and B Jelly on FanDuel tournaments.
On FanDuel, I'd probably play House and Hartman Stein in tournaments. Just like the upside a little bit more, and I like the ownership a little bit more. But that's close. I don't really mind either of those. Those are all players I find pretty appealing.
All right. Oh God, no one else will get this, but I just thought of my left foot with Bagley.
Daniel Day-Lewis. I don't get it though. My left foot with.
That's his injury. I just saw. I had a different screen pop up, and I just caught my eye that said
on Harden.
On Bagley.
Oh, it's his left foot.
Yeah.
Christie.
Let me see here.
Christie something. It's Daniel Day-Lewis plays the role in the film. Christie something is the character's name. I'm spacing it a bit.
All right. So slow-mo, Kyle Anderson, questionable. He has averaged about, let's call it 12 minutes per game in his last few, so nothing overly exciting there. But
Crowder is out, so that makes
yes, that's right. Yeah, Crowder definitely out. So he's got an ankle issue. Charlotte's looking reasonably healthy here, and I mean, this is a phenomenal game. We got two teams that really don't like to play defense. We know that Charlotte is garbage against bigs. We know that Memphis might have 1 or 2 bigs that we can look to. Yeah. We've got questions here coming in about PJ Washington. Let's start over there with the Memphis front court.
But PJ Washington's in the Charlotte.
Sorry, I got that backwards. But let's start over there with the Memphis front court.
Okay. It sounds like it. Do you want to drive the bus here for a second? It sounds like you have like some Valanciunas things.
I really like Valanciunas in this one. I think that he is someone that may kind of go by the wayside today. He's sort of in that sweet spot. If he's not cheap, he's not expensive. It does cost you your center spot on FanDuel, but he is 6,600 there. He's 6,700 on DK. We know that he does have monster upside, and I just think he'll be more or less left unchecked tonight in his ability to get points in the paint, rebounds, etc. And it's a spot I'd really like to plant my flag. I like him for 40 fantasy points tonight. I haven't looked at our projections yet, but he's someone I really like.
I agree entirely. I wouldn't differ much at all. I think I had him when I toyed with numbers earlier today, somewhere around 38 fantasy points, but that was still pretty optimistic, especially considering the limited time he's been getting. And a close game, I think he gets somewhere around 28 minutes. And yeah, in this matchup, I think he gets 38 to 40 fantasy points. I prefer him to Jaren Jackson in this particular spot with them priced about the same. This is the second and final meeting between these two teams this year. And I recall J-Val smacking him around for somewhere around 40 fantasy points in about 25 minutes in the first matchup, if memory serves. He had a big double-double, 15 and 17, something like that. And I would expect absolutely nothing to change in this matchup. So I like Valanciunas a little less than I like Ja Morant, who I think will also go under-owned. I'm going to see if I can actually try for the third time to look at our ownership, but I suspect he is going to have a pretty small number. We have him at 16%. That's not bad. Valanciunas, I bet's a little less. Valanciunas, 15%. Well, there you go. I would slightly rather play Ja Morant at basically the same price. All these guys are in the mid-sixes. But it's exceptional matchups all around. The absence of Crowder helps with a little usage. The Kyle Anderson thing ends up being pretty relevant. We had a day earlier this year where they were like, Crowder was questionable, and at like 4 o'clock in the Slack chat, I was like, "Here we go, Kyle Anderson day," because I was pretty sure Kyle Anderson was going to start, and this was before Jay Crowder had missed a game the entire year, and everyone's like, "No, Solomon Hill is going to start. No, this guy's going to start, and it's going to go all these other ways." And I was talking about Kyle Anderson at like 4 o'clock. It was $3,100, and then he got ruled out like an hour before lock, and ended up being the chalkiest play on the slate, and had like 30 fantasy points, which is really aggravating for me. But in the event Kyle Anderson is in and starts, I would probably only put him around 23 minutes in if they give him the start. And most of this time is going to get somewhat wasted among the varying guys on this team, whether you're dealing with the couple extra minutes going on to Dylan Brooks, or Solomon Hill is going to eat up some time, and Brandon Clark will get a little more next to time, and you may get a little bit more Tyus Jones to DeAnthony Melton to, like, it's just sort of going to get frittered away. It's not going to be a situation, I don't think, where Jay Crowder is out. And anyone aside Kyle Anderson gets a massive amount of time. And I do think they will limit him a little bit to keep him fresh. So my favorite on this team would be Morant. My second favorite would be Valanciunas. My third would actually probably be Dylan Brooks. He's back under 5K. He's been shit for a few games in a row. He just pops off once in a while, and this is as good of a spot as any for him. No issue with his ability to randomly drop 35 or 40 here. So I expect Dylan Brooks won't be on quite as much as I think he would be, so I'd end up a little over on that. After that, trace amounts of Brandon Clark and DeAnthony Melton, who I still have some interest in. I think he'll continue to fight for a role on this team. Fan of his back a couple years now, so I would have a non-zero amount of DeAnthony Melton as well. But yeah, definitely a team to target here. I like all these guys at their prices. And again, if you get news that he's going to start Kyle Anderson in this matchup, I think he's still 3,100 or whatever. He's still some incredibly nominal price. I would have some fair amount of confidence in that, and would try to fairly overwhelmingly get onto that. Now, you're still dealing. That's aside knowing what happens in Houston. If James Harden is also out at that point, the Harden and wanting to stack Houston news would supersede the get some of slow-mo news. But in the event Harden plays and slow-mo starts, I think slow-mo would be a pretty interesting tournament pivot off of those guys. I would only have him projected for somewhere around 24, 25 minutes and somewhere around 19 fantasy points, but he is basically the minimum, and there is more of a ceiling for those minutes. So,
all right,
yeah.
We've got 9 minutes left now. We'll go a little longer to finish. We'll go a little longer to finish everything, but I want to jump ahead for premium chat. Yep. K-Shep Killercamp's asking, can we get an Anthony Davis take for FanDuel?
Right. So, again, it's not fun for anyone to say I don't know enough, but I don't know enough today because normally I spend a half hour, an hour building lineups on the various sites and tinkering, and I have a better feel. And right now I don't have a good feel for power forward on FanDuel and the prices of all the other guys. So I will say the designation of questionable as opposed to probable is not insignificant for me. And again, everybody's on a back-to-back, and some maintenance days do seem appropriate here. So I would be surprised if in the long run the playing of Anthony Davis or not the playing of Anthony Davis would be a remarkably consequential one. You are going to get him at a very small number on FanDuel anyway, because everyone's going to pay attention to it. It is a better matchup for LeBron anyway, in my view. Kristaps does various good things down low. We have seen this matchup twice previously this year as well. Almost certain LeBron had the better game than Anthony Davis both times, and I would expect that to be the case the majority of the time. Now, that's only 60-40 or 65-35. So you will get the better game out of Anthony Davis, and it's Anthony Davis. You will still crack 80 once in a while. So I think it's fine to play Anthony Davis. I suspect on this slate, I would not do much of that on FanDuel. I would say, based on how everything is going with that team, I'd say he's about 80-85% chance to play. But, you could make a very strong argument that that's too high based on a questionable designation. Questionable is supposed to be 50-50. Again, this is based on comments from Vogel yesterday. His comments saying he planned on playing tomorrow. This would seem sort of an odd reversal, but so I guess my answer, those are all my thoughts on the subject. I don't have a particularly strong take, but I suspect I would be generally off playing Anthony Davis in this circumstance on FanDuel as opposed to Harden. I think the advantage and the matchup and everything just sort of works out that way. But again, if you did it, I don't think it's horrible. It's still Anthony Davis. It's still FanDuel, where if you're going to get an obscene number out of Anthony Davis, is a little more likely there because he'll get 11 stocks once in a while. So
let's just stay on this one since we got a few minutes left for the FanDuel people. How are you feeling about Luka Doncic, LeBron James? We had a very, very, very nice game from Kyle Kuzma last night. He's ticked up to 57 on FanDuel. Are these guys that are in your plans? If you want to play it safe, do you go with both these guys instead of a Harden? What are your general thoughts? So we've got 5 minutes till FanDuel locks. And again, we'll relax and do a little bit better analysis once we hit the FanDuel lock for anybody doing
so. So again, yeah, we've seen this twice already, and we saw basically what we expected. It is a much easier matchup for Luka, not that it's a good one, than it is for Kristaps. He ends up taking an even more than normal significant role. Was a little inefficient both games. I think he ended up being 10 for 23 exactly in both games. One game he had a very nice triple-double. Both games he had a pile of turnover, 6 or 7. He's going to volume his way into a very nice score much of the time. I'm fine with Luka. I slightly prefer LeBron as a cash play. I think LeBron is a slightly better value at his price than Luka at his price, but they're very similar. But I think I have Luka projected for fantasy total in the mid to high 50s, which he'll achieve inefficiently, but it is most likely his team. And when he's out there doing his thing, everyone else on the team who has been priced up because of a couple weeks without him is not a particularly compelling option. It's site dependent, but if you're telling me I can't play Luka and I have to play a Maverick in order, it's probably I'd go at value, guys. I'd play Dwight Powell followed by Delon Wright followed by and so on.
All right. Okay.
Did we get news or something? You got a big smile on your face.
No, I was just laughing here at someone was saying Emac said Hield would get to 40 fantasy points and he didn't last night. I'm well aware I had 52% Beal. Or I mean Hield. I also said Beal wasn't going to get to 60. I won that one because he didn't play. I crushed it with I had 100% Julius Randle, Eddie. He got 60.
Oh,
I had 100% Alfred Payton. He got 20. It giveth and it taketh away. The thing that killed me, 100% John Williams. Now, why did I have 100% of so many guys? I had a lineup upload issue. There we are.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah, I was going to say 100% John Williams. But don't get me wrong, that team. Now they sent Admiral Schofield down to the G League again, and they sent Robinson back down, and John Williams was flavor of the week for a while there.
He was looking good.
I like LeBron. I don't want to spend 57 on Kuzma. Okay. He's one of the most overrated players of modern basketball. Kyle Kuzma is fine, and he's legitimately above average on one end of the court, but people need to slow the hell down. He's not even 100%. So, 4K Kyle Kuzma, I was plenty excited about. Like $5,700 Kyle Kuzma, I have remarkably little interest in if LeBron and Anthony Davis are in. If one of those dudes are sitting, we're having a different conversation. But assuming they both play, not a lot of interest. In the event that Anthony Davis gets ruled out, yeah, by all means, give me some Kyle Kuzma. Give me some Rajon Rondo. Give me some Alex Caruso. Like I'll take you get Anthony Davis out there. Give me most notably some JaVale McGee and some Dwight Howard.
All right, Nicholas Lynn, you can't fool Miss Cleo. I am not Miss Cleo, but call me now.
Hell is going
Do you remember Miss Cleo from the one?
Of course, I remember Miss Cleo.
The 1-800 or the 1-900, whatever.
Yeah. Psychic Friends Network
Hotline or whatever it was called. Yeah. Oh, it was a simpler time in the 90s. Much simpler.
Yeah, it's just whenever people are so stupid now, you're like, oh man, people have always been so stupid.
Yes.
I can't believe people are doing this stupid thing they're doing now. It's like, we've always been eating Tide Pods metaphorically.
That was exactly the one that just popped in my head, was Tide Pods.
No, we have always been eating Tide Pods. I'm going into what meager news tank I can on my dinky little laptop.
All right, so you look at that real quick, chat. We're gonna loop back through these games. Not the fair. This is just for the FanDuel lock here. Eddie will interrupt me if anything comes in. We got about 90 seconds. But reminder, we are sponsored by Fantasy Draft, home of rake-free daily fantasy sports. If you have not yet signed up, what are you waiting for? I'm looking forward to seeing what they have for the NFL wildcard weekend. They've been putting out some phenomenal Hooters main events. Today was $100,000. That's rake-free. Everything that's paid in gets paid out, and it's a guaranteed prize pool. So if it didn't completely fill, they're still on the hook for the remainder of the money. How does it work, rake-free? How do they get their operating fees, you ask? Well, what they do is you have a subscription to play. So mine is $1,000 every 30 days. That costs me $5.99. If I were to play through that $1,000 of play on any other site, that would cost me between $120 and $150. So $6 or $120. I'd rather pay the $6. And even if I don't play there every day, it's no big deal. Everybody can play $100 every 30 days, so nobody is locked out. But once you hit your limit, you need to have a subscription. If you have a subscription and hit the limit, you just got to buy up to the next one, and then they give you that rolling forward for the 30 days. So it's a pretty fair deal for everybody on those. So definitely check those out. Let's see here. All right, let's chat. Put in a few questions. I was winning a winner take all, and now I'm not winning it. So my currently winning on DraftKings went way down. That would happen if you're playing a winner take all, Eddie. That would happen.
Yeah. Oh, you get more no Trae Young. Point John Collins going again. Point Kevin Huerter. I wish I was home. I don't like not being home. So much catching up to do.
There is, a fair amount. So back to, let's kind of wrap up with Dallas here. Any secondary plays away from Luka? I mean, I know you kind of said he tamps down.
I can't. Okay. I can't justify it. Kristaps is still priced too high. Like I would have a non-zero amount of shares of Dwight Powell. That would probably be. I would literally play Dwight Powell, Luka Doncic, maybe Delon Wright, because. Just again, his game ends up being really fantasy friendly. I can see them needing a little more of him in this matchup because of the switches. But it's a bad spot. I would be surprised if anyone outside of Luka ended up being terribly viable. And again, we have some time and we're post lock here. I'll look at we have seen this game a couple times this year, and it is not a spot that. Let's see, Lakers and Mavericks, November 1st this year. Let me see if I'm remembering all this junk correctly. They each won on the other team's floor. LA won in Dallas, and Dallas won in LA when they played earlier this year. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Here's the other Mavericks. Dwight Powell had 14 and 5. That's not good enough. Kristaps had 16 and 9. That's not good enough. Dorian Finney-Smith had 7, 10, 1, and 3 with 4 turnovers, so 22 out of DFS. Luka had a triple-double. There you go. Seth Curry had 4, 2, 1, and 1. That's not good enough. Maxi Kleber, 8 and 8. Justin Jackson, not good enough. Boban, not good enough. Jalen Brunson, not good enough. Delon Wright, 12-1-1-1. Tim Hardaway Jr., 11-5-1. Yeah. All right. So first game, the mans you wanted were Luka and no one. Okay. Second game, I wouldn't be surprised to see something pretty damn similar. I kind of watched it, but I could be forgetting one of the ancillary pieces. But it's going to be just a spot where he ends up taking so much usage and somewhat inefficiently. I was right. He's 10 for 23 both games. Triple-double in one game with 8 turnovers, and the other one 27, 10, and 9 with 7 turnovers. Dorian Finney-Smith 6 and 5. Kristaps Porzingis 15 and 6. Dwight Powell 15 and 9. So you would have wanted Dwight Powell from this game. That's good to see. They need to body up a little bit because of the size down there. That's the only reason. Again, I'd have had some interest, but again, far from a must. And on a slate with the Rockets' value, either way, going to be a pretty low priority for me. And Delon Wright 17, 9, 5, and 4. So yeah, I would like Luka. Luka looks just fine to me. Past that, little bits of Dwight Powell, little bits of Delon Wright. One game only, Luka was good. The other one, Dwight Powell and Delon Wright were good, and that was it. So, yep. And again, both games, LeBron was a little better, which I would expect. Yeah, not a ton to add there. It is pretty predictable how this should go down, I think. So.
All right. Let's see. A couple questions coming in on premium chat. Thoughts on Mclemore and Rivers, or House and Eric Gordon if Harden is in DraftKings?
If Harden is in, I would want the Gordon side. If Harden is out, I would want the other side.
Okay.
Like if Harden is out, I can't not take the Ben McLemore side, and at that point, I'm going to get 30 whatever minutes out of Rivers as well. If Harden is in, it's going to tilt better to the House and Gordon side. So with Harden in, I would take House and Gordon. With Harden out, I would take McLemore and Rivers.
If Millsap is out on DraftKings, how much would you push towards Jeremy Grant?
It's going to depend if he starts or not. If they start Plumlee again, it wouldn't change. I would still have him behind all the Houston value. If he got the start and if the news was released closer to lock, then I'd be fairly interested, because at this point you're looking at a 4-game slate on DraftKings and you're just trying to get different, and you'll end up with 10% there as opposed to 45% on those other guys. So it would really depend on when the news hit, to be honest. The closer towards lock, the more I would want to move. Again, it sounds boring, but making those moves post lock but pre-game with late swap has been really critical this year. And if we looked at the 10 days where people scooped the most money in our premium Slack chat, 3 or 4 of them were just based on days where not enough people moved, and guys who should have been 20% owned ended up 4% owned. So I would keep a close eye on it, but it would have a lot to do with that's one of the 8 p.m. games. So at 7:55, if it comes out, Millsap's out, Jeremy Grant starting, I'd have a lot of interest. 7:20, he would remain behind the Houston guys for me.
Okay. Someone was saying they don't ever want to play Jaren Jackson Jr. because of the foul issues. I do want to point out that over his last 5 games, he has had 3 or 4 fouls. He's averaging 3.5 during that span, and he's also averaging 32.5 minutes in that span. So he's doing a better job. Yes, 6 games ago? Yeah, he played 16 minutes because he had 5 fouls.
Yeah.
It was against Steven Adams. Stuff happens. But the next game against Steven Adams, he hung around, took 19 shots, and had 41 DK points. So that's just for tournaments. But yes, it's dangerous. But hell, but we saw what happened with Kelly Oubre. He was averaging like 4 minutes per game, and then he ended up getting his ass benched for a good part of it. One thing I want to touch on is Charlotte. We didn't really get into Devontae Graham or Terry Rozier in their phenomenal matchup here against Memphis. How are you liking those guys? Nawave?
No, not waving you. Hold a second, please.
Yes.
Could you excuse me, please? Not now. It's okay? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. guy wanted to come in and clean up the room. I was like, no, and he's standing there. I'm like, no.
I heard him. I speak Spanish. You want me fluff pillow? I heard what he said.
Jesus. Well, it's like I'm clearly doing something. I got the headset on him in the corner, and I got the laptop in the thing, and I'm like, no, I'm good. And he just stands there. I'm like, no, I'm good. And he just stands there. I'm like, no, I'm good. And he stands there. And I'm like, I'm good. He's like, you're sure? No, I'm like, I'm good. It's like, okay. I'd have to answer that question 6 times. Like, I really wanted to clean the room. And
we should have asked him what he thought about Rozier and Devontae Graham. That's what we missed.
Yeah, so it's really weird all around. I have the do not disturb on the door. So nonetheless, opens the door and enters the room. Just bizarre, but okay, whatever. Moving on. It's just weird. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, the Charlotte guys, for me, Rozier and Graham, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but the 2 guys I'm most interested in. PJ Washington, saw really giant minutes his last game out. I'd have some number of shares of him, but not the best individual matchup on his side. I would defer most to the guards. This is the run back for these 2 teams. Watched this game a couple weeks ago only. I don't have the strongest recollection of it for whatever reason. So I don't have a strong takeaway. But we have seen, I would probably rather play Devontae Graham than anyone else on this team. The return of PJ Washington to the rotation just messes up this entire thing with Biyombo and Zeller and what's going on with them. And, Batum, who is starting for Ben and is now back entirely out of the rotation. And, Washington himself, obviously, and then Marvin Williams, who, is going to get 18 or 25 minutes. And then, Malik Monk is always usable. But Devontae Graham is probably my guy that I have the most interest playing on this team. We have seen a number of guys in that role, from Booker to Zach LaVine to just a number of guys in his spot smack around this Memphis team. And one of these days, like, he's been perfectly reasonable fantasy-wise, and he's shooting just terribly from the field. So at a certain point, he's going to make half his shots, and you're going to get 60 fantasy points out of Devontae Graham again. So he would be the first guy I would be interested in targeting on the Charlotte team.
All right. Anything else you want to impart to our audience on this now 4-game slate starting at 8 o'clock?
Yeah, if they're if they have, I want to look at the box from that game because I really don't remember. I remember Valanciunas' decent game, and that's it. Let's see. Terry Rozier, 13 for 20 from the field for 33, 6, 5, and 2. Devontae Graham, 7 for 19. So yeah, those guys each took 20 shots, and that's what I would expect to see. So I would slightly prefer going to Graham, though I don't recall the prices offhand. So let me see. I think I grabbed those earlier today. So I think they're here. Yeah, okay, I do have them. So I'll, giving me just a second, answer them better. So John Morant at 65 and 64. I prefer slightly to Terry Rozier at 65 and 69. Devontae Graham at 76 and 79. I would also slightly prefer to Terry Rozier. I would probably barely rank them Morant, Graham, Rozier, but I'd have them all in a pretty tight band. And then we should always factor in the ownership. And we again looked before, and we had Morant at 16. What's going on? People enjoying me struggling with my remote setup here?
No, they said, let's see, Mr. Pink doesn't tip. Eddie's got housekeeping, keeping him on his slate. Eddie's doing live before lock on a pissy mattress next week for being that guy.
I tip every day, actually. I literally live I live those single life. Like I tip everybody all day. And I've always found the socioeconomics of this area very strange. Like, I've been to Mexico a number of times, and it's always a little bit awkward for me. But I'm a tipping monster. That doesn't mean you should come in past the do not disturb sign. Just walk into the room and stand there and observe me on the phone for 30 seconds. And I still don't think that's a great job. But I'm not gonna call the guy's boss or anything. It's really weird. You just stand there. He's like, hey. I'm like, hey, how you doing? No, I'm good, thanks. It's like, and I'm like,
Reddick or Hart?
Reddick or Hart? Was that the
Yes.
question?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question in that game. Normally it would be Reddick for me, but with the changes and no Westbrook and potentially no Hart, that would actually make it hard for me. So I would play Hart at this point. That's a good question, though.
Barracuda or Crazy on You?
Ooh,
Secret option C, Magic Man?
just for the canticle and the acoustic guitar at the beginning, I will go with Crazy On. But that is tough. That is really nicely done. That's really good.
That's my favorite song by them. I've seen them, I think, 4 times now in concert, which is hilarious that I've done all of those since I've been in Virginia and never seen them in Seattle. They're based in Seattle.
Yeah, they are the original grunge Heart.
Good times. Good times.
So
All
I'll be doing more singing tonight.
I don't think you go ahead and tell chat that, and then we'll get on out of here.
No, I was talking with guys about it before. But anyhow, I was crushing some karaoke for a while, and so they let me sing with the house band in the lobby for a couple hours. So it's the hard rock. It's a very good house band. It's hard rock, and so I've just been sitting there singing to people as they check in the lobby for an hour a day for the last couple of days, and I'm going to continue to do that shortly. So that's taking up my time, which has been an absolute blast for me. I forgot how great it was to be up there with a live band, and these guys can really play. So I've enjoyed that. But linked yet another reason. I don't know if they've gotten out on the Twitter or will, but I've in the premium Slack, I'll link a couple videos of me wailing. It's been fun. So that's what I'm doing. I will hope to be back Tuesday, assuming my partner in crime, Josh, wants me there.
All right. Let's see. This is for Elroy Jenkins. Elroy Jenkins! I don't know if he's related to Leroy or not, but
yeah.
You've got, would you prefer Ja Morant or Will Barton tonight?
I prefer Ja Morant. Yeah, that whole I'm gonna pretty significantly. I like guys from the Memphis Charlotte game a lot more than I like guys from that. So yeah, that would be Morant for me by a pretty significant step. Now I imagine again we had Morant at around 16% ownership. We have Barton at around 16% ownership. So yeah, that's not even close to me. That's not even like I that surprises me. I have Morant with a higher ceiling and projected for more and just all kinds of good stuff. So
and then
yeah, I would like Morant a lot more.
One last clarification: did you say that I had typed an answer in chat saying that you had thought Kuzma was an overrated player? Was he an overrated fantasy player, or is he just overrated for tonight's matchup and price? I wanted to make sure anybody filing this away for future, I want them to have the code.
I did not recall the specific price you dropped on him, but I believe you said 5,700. I think that's now. I thought he was 48 somewhere, and that's where I'm getting.
DK, I think he's 40. I'll look that up. FanDuel, I think he's 57.
Okay, well those are two different balls of wax. So at 5,700, I would have very little interest. At 4,800 on a 4-game slate on DraftKings, as opposed to 5,700 on a 5-game slate on FanDuel, I would find him fine. He does not do a ton but score, and when you have Anthony Davis and LeBron in, there's only so much of that scoring to go around. So he's not a guy who can get me or will frequently get you 20 points in peripheral. So I need 26 real points out of him to somehow make a GPP upside score out of 5,700. So FanDuel, relatively low interest. I personally would probably play none. I'm just not a super believer. He's, I'm sure, probable again tonight, but he's also, not 100% all the way back. So DK, I'm fine with it. I would have 5 or 10%. It's a 4-game slate. That makes some degree of sense. But yeah, so that's how I would contextualize.
Perfect. I wanted to. I felt bad if I was leading someone astray there, and I didn't want it. All right. Excellent. Well, we're going to get on out of here at 7:30. You will get the NFL Live Before Lock. Seahawks, Marshawn Lynch back in our lives.
That's great. I'm going to try to watch that.
Yeah, beast mode. Let's find out how long those hamstrings can last, considering he's been on the couch all season. And then they signed Robert Turbin as well. Robert Turbin, I think, has played in
Old school.
23 games over the last 3 years and has not played this year, but he played for the Seahawks in 2014. So same coaching staff, same plays, same quarterback. So they brought him in. It looks like rookie 6th round pick Travis Homer should get the first crack. He is not cheap. He is favorably priced for this level of uncertainty. Or pardon me, he is appropriately priced by the sites for this level of uncertainty that we have. But we've got the article on the homepage there.
Can you play Marshawn?
Yes,
is Marshawn on DFS sites? They added him.
They added him because this is the night game. It wasn't on anybody's main slates, or the ones that did. I think we're able to have him in the player pool because the Seahawks announced this They announced it, I think, on Monday, so that they were probably going to do it. So there we go. We'll find out. But with that, we started all over. Show tonight at 7:30, and then tomorrow morning 9:30, you get the NBA DFS strategy show. I don't know what's at 11. I wonder if it's one last look for the NFL with Laffy and Manny, but we will definitely.
Is there a game? Is there a game tomorrow?
No, there's no game. This is it. The next game will be Saturday and Sunday for Wild Card Weekend.
Right, that's what I thought. So when you were saying you thought there might be NFL tomorrow, I was confused.
At 11. We've been doing the NFL DFS strategy show Monday through Saturday at 11.
Oh, okay.
Every week.
Okay.
I'm assuming there will be something, just recapping this week and a look ahead. I don't think there will be 6 shows. There will probably be 2 or 3, though. But we'll get that schedule posted. They've already worked on the schedule. I just haven't seen it yet. But you guys will know that. And then, of course, Deep Dive and Live Before Lock. Tomorrow night, we've got, I want to say, a 6-game NBA slate. So lots of fun ahead for us. The only weird slate is New Year's Eve. I believe there are 3 games going off around 5 o'clock and then 4 or 5 games going off at 7 o'clock. So kind of a split slate there. But with that, gamers, good luck.